911, what's your emergency?
Yes, help. Is this emergency services?
No, this is Josh.
Nice.
I want all of our listeners to know that we waffled for a while to come up with something we could do for this episode.
The thing is, we did not want to make light of any serious issues brought up in this episode. Speaking of which, we'd like to do a little content warning for the first time, just because this is an episode that is more concerned with domestic violence, violence against women, things like that. It's not super graphic, and obviously, like, we're a podcast, we can't show it to you, and we try to be like not too graphic about these things. But, you know, if that's a sensitive topic for you, you might not want to listen to this one.
Yeah, because it is the whole episode. Like, it's whole episode. Like, that's what this episode is. I was like, for a moment, I was like, waffling on like how much of a content warning we should do, just because like our audience also watches the show, so they know what the show is. But I think for the benefit of everyone and for safety's sake, it's good to just issue one here.
Yeah, and as you were saying before we started recording, allegedly we do have some people who listen who have not watched the show at all, which is hilarious.
We've gotten some comments that are like, maybe I'm misinterpreting them, but we have gotten some comments that are like, have I seen 911? No. Am I going to listen to this podcast? Yes.
Like, and okay, diva.
And so for your sake and everyone else's, just know that that's what this episode is.
Yeah, this is very much the Maddie facing off with her abusive husband episode. Yes. And that being said, it is awesome. Like, this awesome. Is a great one.
This episode is an absolute banger. This is like such a sauced episode.
We're in a sauced season. And can I just say, like, genuinely from my perspective, I think, and this is going to be controversial, I think this might be the best made episode of the show yet. Because, wow. And it is a very big claim, but I'm saying it with my whole heart, because this episode is so focused. The acting is stellar. The writing is really good. And the directing is wonderful. It's shot very tastefully, and a lot of like the scenes, like the scenery they used in this episode. I mean, like, I'm from the West Coast, so I love West Coast imagery, and like I was just like living for, especially like we'll get to it, but like those shots of Maddie in the snow and everything. I was just like, oh my god. Yeah, this one feels high production value in that way, because it's kind of expanding the scope of what we usually see. Because, like, what other episode of 911 has snow in it, you know? Literally.
Until we get our 911 Anchorage or our 911 Vancouver.
911 Minnesota.
Sorry. Throwing you about 911 St. Paul.
I want it, okay? I have to say, this show is very, like, reliant on Minnesota. I feel like it owes a lot to Minnesota. That's all I'm saying. We have a main character who's from Minnesota and has this dramatic backstory there. And also, I read that the latest arc on 911, the weepy voiced killer thing, that was actually based on a case from the Twin Cities. So once again, it's like they're trying to reheat the Twin Cities' nachos.
Jesus Christ.
That's a phrase I'm totally using correctly, right, everybody?
Yeah. What? First of all,
language evolves.
First of all, Jesus Christ. First of all, weepy voiced serial killer from Minnesota. What is it? Why is it always like Minnesota and Wisconsin and Michigan that have the weirdest serial killers? Wasn't Jeffrey Dahmer from like Wisconsin?
Listen, there's not a lot to do up here, you guys.
You might as well kill people, right?
Dahmer was from Wisconsin, and Ed Gein was also from
oh my god,
Wisconsin.
So the fucking weirdest fucking serial killers in history. Like,
yeah, we have a lot of serial killers and a lot of alcoholics, because what else can you do in those cold months of the year?
I feel like those do kind of go hand in hand. I'm not gonna lie. Like
it's true. Although I think Ed Gein had I don't think he was a drinker.
I don't know. He was a weirdo. I mean, he was a bit of an oddball. That's what they said about him, actually. And you know who else? Speaking of oddballs, Doug, the domestic abuser, he was quite a bit of an oddball.
We open this episode, if we want to just dive right in, we open this episode picking up where we left right off after New Beginnings, and, you know, Chimney begins with a 911, the only 911 call of the episode, I believe.
Yeah.
Buck calls 911. He found Chimney. He came home. Chimney was there. He was bleeding out in the courtyard. And he's still alive. He's still alive.
Yeah.
And who should pick up the phone? Who should pick up the phone but Josh Russo?
Literally the first interaction between Buck and Josh. It's not a happy one, but it is an interaction.
For all of the Buck Josh girlies out there, I know there's two of you at least. Congratulations on your foundational episode. The biggest
Bosh. Hashtag Bosh.
Hashtag Bosh.
Juck.
Hashtag Juck. Oh my god.
I'm always saying that.
The streets are always saying that too. It's like, it's weird to think about like fringe aspects of the fandom, but I know there's at least one person out there for which Buck and Josh meeting for the first time was the most important thing to happen in this episode for them.
That is crazy to imagine, but yes. Ooh, we didn't even mention that this episode was written by Kristen Reidel.
Yes.
So jot that down. Because,
come on, Kristen.
Come on, another example of Kristen being a great writer who has been unfairly maligned by this fandom.
Because this fandom hates women.
The episode was also directed by someone named Millicent Shelton, which I just wanted to bring up because, like, what a quaint name.
Come on, Ms. Shelton.
She's directed like 2 episodes of 911, and I looked on her IMDb. She also directed the Shark Attack episode of Dr. Odyssey, which I haven't seen, but I imagine would probably be like my favorite episode of the show if I were still watching it. So I say good on Millicent.
So when did you fall off of Dr. Odyssey? Because I know it was kind of your bridging the gap show between 911 and Grey's. How soon did you bow out?
In between them. It airs in between them, and I had thought, you know, it marketed itself as being like from the people who brought you 911, and I thought that sounded great. It was one of the worst TV pilots I've ever seen in my life. And then I probably watched maybe like 5 or 6 episodes in, if that. I don't remember which one where I was like, I can't keep watching this. But like, it's not even just like, I would love if it was like silly bad, but to me, it's not even like that. I found it boring. I found it like annoying.
Yeah.
The badness of the writing. It was often kind of like film student-y. Like it had the vibe to me of like an inexperienced writer. Like I remember this episode where the like young British guy character, like his mom was visiting, and he has tension between him and his mom. Sorry for the Dr. Odyssey tangent, guys, if you end up leaving this in. But he has tension with his mom, and he like has this argument with her, I guess you could call it, where he basically just like gives her this like speech, this really on the nose, unsubtle, like lame speech about like, you were never there for me when I was growing up, and you ignored me. Like it was just terrible, terrible writing, in the sense that you don't really want to have characters just say exactly what they're feeling out loud all the time. And also it read to me, no offense to the writer of the show, but it read to me as like a deeply personal kind of like getting one's frustration out at their real life parent woes through this character in a way that again felt very film student to me, in a very cringe way, like someone who has not yet learned how to pare down their dialogue to tell a story and to be interesting and to reveal more about their characters. And that was one of the moments where I was like, this is like almost unwatchably bad.
I love it when the scathing critique of a show just devolves into ad hominem attacks at the writer.
It's not ad hominem if the person, it's personal, but it's not ad hominem. That would be like if I was like, Dr. Odyssey is bad because the writer has an ugly haircut.
That's true. I was being uncharitable. I do agree with you that it was one of the worst pilots I've ever seen in my entire life. And
Despacito in the year of our Lord 2024 is wild.
You lasted longer than I did. I watched the pilot, and then the second episode I only watched the scenes with Cord Overstreet, because that was the whole reason I watched the pilot to begin with, because I knew he was in it, and then he wasn't even in that. I've told this story before, but I'm still angry about it, and so I only watched Cord's scenes, and then I dipped, and I have not watched it since. But I am flabbergasted that so much of the 911 fandom seems to be eating it up. And so I'm just curious, what is it about Dr. Odyssey that is so alluring, that is so enjoyable?
Exactly what. I can tell you exactly what. They did like a threesome episode, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
They did like a threesome episode, I'm pretty sure. And now 911 Twitter is convinced that it's like a queer show. I'm going to be honest with you guys. From what I saw of it, it was like one of the straightest shows I've ever seen in a very bad way. It seemed its characters were not remotely interesting. Their relationships were not interesting. And I would bet that this threesome thing will not result in like a bunch of bisexual characters. I think it was probably just a one-off kind of fetishy thing for the show to do. That's just my 2 cents. I could be proven wrong. Let me know if I need to tune back into Dr. Odyssey, but you know, it'd take some convincing.
You're probably right. I just feel like I got no homoerotic tension between the two men on that show at all.
I agree.
And I didn't see any screenshots of them locking lips during the threesome. So
yeah, I think that's the thing. I don't think they like kissed or anything. I think it was mostly just an opportunity for both of them to have the girl they both liked. I could see the girl, Philippa Sue, her character maybe being a girl kisser, but I was not getting a real gay vibe off of either of those guys. They just seemed really that was like one. Sorry, I'm going off about this.
No, it's fine.
That was one of the things I really disliked about the pilot is it had such a simple central conceit for this show and the characters. It's like, well, this guy likes the girl, and now there's a new guy on the scene, and he likes the girl too, and she likes the new guy a little more than she likes the old guy.
It's like, haven't we done this before?
Despacito.
Haven't we done this before?
It's like, not that everything needs to be like super new and original, but like if you're not going to do it well, then what's the point?
Like the love triangle between the two guys and the girl is like, it's the most like worn out like character relationship trope in like, I would argue, all of media, other than maybe someone has a parent they don't like or is dead, you know, like
which
like,
is
it's
also
not
exploited clunkily on Dr. Odyssey.
And so it's not to say that you can't do that, but if you're not doing anything new with it, I ask, like, what is the point? What are you, I guess, adding to this sort of dynamic other than
it also would be different.
Spit roast her, you know, like what else are they adding?
It also would be different if the like non-character interpersonal stuff was interesting, like if there was some big twist to the premise of this show that made it really exciting, but there's not.
It's the doctor on a cruise ship.
Stuff was really boring. Yeah, and I could get down with a show that's like Grey's Anatomy on a cruise ship, right? Like, we're gonna take every episode to have crazy medical emergencies, which was clearly kind of the pitch of the show. But when I watched it, I did not feel like that was what I was seeing. Like the medical stuff was not nearly wacky enough to justify this all the boring other stuff on the show.
And the cast isn't large enough. The ensemble cast isn't large enough to make the cruise ship setting feel big. From what I watched,
those 3 people and the old guy.
3 people and the old
Don
guy
Johnson,
going through like the same 5 settings, and it's like you managed to make a luxury cruise liner feel small. What the fuck is wrong with you? Think about like how big the hospital in Grey's Anatomy felt because of how many characters there were, and they were all doing different things at different times all over the place. It just like, there's no sense of scale with your setting because you've scaled down the cast so much. It just doesn't work for me. So like, if those characters don't work for you, and they didn't work for me, that British guy, I hated him right off the bat.
Oh, he was so annoying.
And Pacey from Dawson's Creek, I'm sorry, is not enough of a draw for me to get invested in the most bland, white bread character I've ever seen in my life. Sorry, Mr. Odyssey. Dr. Odyssey,
I
sorry.
like that actor. I haven't seen much of Dawson's Creek, but like I like Joshua Jackson. I think he is like charming and whatever. And so I was kind of sold when I heard he was in it. And then they give him like the most boring character of all time. I'm sorry, Dr. Odyssey fans out there. I'm sorry, but let's end this tangent. And low-key, maybe you should cut it out to make it its own thing, and we can just put it on YouTube.
No, Jane, we gotta Jane, we gotta leave some of them in.
And this one has been too long for me to want to leave it in.
Well, we'll see. Well, I'll see how I'm feeling in the editing bay. So Buck calls 911. Josh is on the other line. Sparks fly. Chimney is dying. And so they need to get EMTs there now. And they show up. They show up in a timely fashion. There's a Sue Blevins moment where she comes over. And as Chim is like sort of delirious, he tells Buck that Jason took Maddie. Jason Bailey, his friend. And so the hunt begins. Buck rushes off. He does his little scared Buck run that we all love so much. He's going, Maddie! Maddie! And he runs into the house.
Yeah, he like bounds up those stairs like 5 at a time with his freakishly long legs. And Maddie is nowhere to be found. And Sue at the dispatch center says, he found her. And we all know what that means. I forgot to say before that, Buck has like realized that her phone's still there, her stuff's still there. And this is like not even remotely funny at all, but I decided to write it down. Buck says this line where he says, all of her stuff is still here. And I thought it was kind of funny that they made an actor named Oliver say this line that sounds like he's saying Oliver. He says, all of her stuff is still there.
All of her stuff. That would be his competitive eating champion arc in his personal life section on Wikipedia.
Really? I thought you were going to say a different kind of arc.
You know, listen. No. If anything, actually, Oliver Stark sounds like a dope name for that kind of arc, too. So,
I agree. It's kind of that vibe.
Yeah. But then we get the title card, and it is a banger of a cold open. It just throws us right into it. It's very high octane, right from the word
and
jump.
And it's nice that they don't waste any time just because we have had this whole Chimney Begins thing in between the 2 episodes. Yeah. You're kind of like still very much on the edge of your seat. Like, is Chimney even alive? So I imagine if you were watching this for the first time, you would want them to just get right into it instead of like spending any more time trying to draw it out.
Yeah, what a cold open. But we go from that to a flashback to Maddie's old life with Doug in Pennsylvania?
Question mark? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, something like that.
This is an interesting scene where they kind of set it up as if like these are the good old days with Doug, right? He seems like he's being pretty loving. He apparently has just been promoted to chief of cardiothoracic surgery. So little Christina Yang moment.
Yes.
So he and Maddie are kind of celebrating, and he has brought a bottle of white wine moment. I'm having a little white wine as we speak. In celebration. Like what happens in this episode.
It's okay. I had a double espresso martini before we got here, so I am ready for this.
So you're like wired and buzzed.
Exactly. Sam Cooke is playing. Maddie made a whole little playlist of celebration of like love songs, classic love songs from like the 60s. Marvin Gaye, Sam Cooke, just like all the greats. Very romantic.
Doug like calls Maddie his like good luck girl or something. Like they're both really happy in this moment. And Doug does mention, interestingly enough, he implies that he kind of has daddy issues. He says, you know, it'll never be good enough for my dad. And again, good writing, because you're like, it's just a little seed that tells you, oh, maybe that's where his maybe this is a cycle of abuse kind of situation.
Yeah. He says specifically. He says specifically he's the second youngest cardiothoracic, the chief of cardiothoracic medicine in the state. Second youngest, wouldn't be good enough for my dad, but screw him or whatever. And it's like, oh.
And then he also implies that he maybe has mommy issues too, because he pulls out these like crystal champagne glasses. He's like, we're not using those $2 Chuck glasses. We're going to use, no offense to Buck, we're going to use the nice glasses. And this is the first time you kind of see maybe some cracks in what you're seeing, because Maddie seems kind of apprehensive. She's like, really? Like, we haven't used those since the wedding. And Doug says, well, yeah, this is a special occasion. And he says, toast more gently this time. Like, you can still see the chip there. So, like, a lot to unpack there.
It's like one of those little, like, micro, like, jabs that is, like, little, like, little nudges, little, like, oh. So he's constantly, like, sort of correcting her, or pointing out her little flaws, needling her like that. Yeah.
And you can imagine that, like, it sort of also implies that, like, maybe that was its own, you know, big blow up thing whenever that happened.
Yeah.
And he mentions that these are his mom's special glasses and they're all he has left of her. So you kind of get a picture here of, like, he's got something going on with, like, his entire parental dynamic where, like, he's got this idealized, like, dead mother figure and, like, this abusive father, presumably. Honestly, just good writing to, like, weave those things all into this conversation and sort of set up a little backdrop for why Doug is the way he is.
Yeah, it's all you need. It's all the backstory you need about this guy, because we know what his role is in the narrative, in Maddie's life and everything, and, like, we know his purpose in the show. And so we get just little peeks into his backstory to be like, oh, so he wasn't just, like, born a blood psychopath. Like,
it's nice. It's a nice, like, subtle way to you know, we don't get, like, a Doug Begins episode, luckily, but it's a nice subtle way to, like you said, like, not just be like, this is an evil monster since birth, but instead to be like, this is, like, how an abuser is, like, this is a result of some things. And we cut to, like, they're in the backyard, they're drinking out of their special glasses, they're, like, dancing, everything seems well. And then, you know, Buck has set down Buck? Oh my god, Freudian slip.
Whoa
I'm so sorry, you guys.
But
I
hold
almost
on.
did this
No, Jane.
I feel like I almost did this in the last episode we recorded.
Jane, Buck would never,
to be clear.
Thank you. Buck would
It's just because
never.
they have kind of similar sounding names and they both have a relationship to Maddie. And so, and I say Buck more often than I say Doug, so it just doesn't roll off my tongue. Doug has set Maddie's glass down on, like, a side table and he twirls her too hard and she knocks into the table and knocks down the glass and it shatters. And you see her, like, totally tense up, like, oh god, like, he's about to go crazy on me. But Doug is like, it's fine, you know? My mom used to say that mistakes are just opportunities to learn. And then his face kind of darkens and he's like, too bad you never learn. And then, like, hits her, and then we cut back to the present where they're in the car together.
But very important sort of little character thing to notice about Doug in this scene is that he is the one that sets the glasses down on the table. He is the one that pulls Maddie into the dance. He's the one that twirls her too
totally
hard.
His fault.
Yeah, and he's the one that pins it all on Maddie because he's this sort of, you know, narcissistic guy that uses her as the source of everything that's wrong in his life or everything bad that happens, and wails on her for it. He ends the scene, he punctuates the scene, one could say, by hitting her hard, and then it's like a smash cut to him hitting her hard again in the car. I wrote down the note, all he does is punch her, which is true.
Yeah. Oh, I also wanted to say this is another thing that's, like, not an interesting observation, but it is an observation that I had. It seemed like in this scene, like in the script, it seemed like they were supposed to be drinking champagne, but it's clearly just regular white wine. Like, I looked closely when he was pouring it and it didn't fizz. So they're just drinking regular white wine, but it feels like it's coded as, like, champagne. Yeah. So I just was wondering, like,
it's like a crystal champagne glass or something like that, right?
Yeah. But also, I don't think we see them, like, take any drinks of it in this scene. So I don't see why they couldn't have just popped a real bottle of sparkling wine.
Yeah. So even
you
just like a cheap
one for the one shot where he pours it,
like a cheap, like, $17 bottle of prosecco you get at, like, the corner liquor store or something.
A cheap bottle of prosecco for me is like $11 for the record, if that.
Okay, I guess they've been marking up the prosecco bottles at my liquor store.
You do live in New York, so actually it probably just costs more there.
Okay, well, I also drink $9 Dark Horse wine. I drink $9 Dark Horse wine. So let me just say, I'm not a wine snob.
You're not an elitist.
I'm not an elitist. I want to be very clear about this. There have been times I've had so many dregs in my wine bottle that, like, the bottle's not even done yet, and I'm getting dregs that I've literally used a strainer to pour wine into my glass.
Oh.
But Doug's got Maddie in the car. He's yelling at her. She's in tears. It's a very grisly scene. He's doing that sort of like male abuser thing of just like yelling at his victim and just screaming at her and just like being very domineering and just is very aggressive. I mean, I'm just describing abuse here. So
he's doing that abuser thing when he's like evil and manipulative and physically harmful.
Exactly.
To his victim.
Exactly. He's like a blood psychopath. But as he's sort of like yelling at her, he's like, "I didn't want to kill Chimney." They think Chimney's dead. "I didn't want to kill Chimney.
Yeah.
He was my friend. I liked the guy." Maddie's like, "What?" And she's realizing he's been in town for a minute, and he's sort of like trying to rope her into like a Bonnie and Clyde scenario. It seems like he's like, this is gonna be bad for both of us. This is over for both of us. You don't come back from killing a guy. And the way that he's talking about things, like, it's wrong to say you like Doug as a character because you don't. What I like is how Doug is written, because you see a lot of his internal logic when he's being abusive. He's like sort of voicing how he's sort of like rationalizing his actions to himself. He feels like he has to do this. He feels like he's protecting her in some weird twisted way. He says that he saw that he was watching Maddie from afar, and once he saw Chimney ask her out, like, he knew he had waited too long, and he needed her back because they're meant to be together or whatever. It's just this really twisted, dark sort of idea of like what love and romance is, and she's suffering the consequences, and Chimney suffering the consequences. He's like he really comes across like in this sort of meltdown in the car scene. He comes across like really like a child who's sort of never learned the consequences of his like temper tantrums. It's insane just how juvenile he, and I guess men in general, come across when they yell like this. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But they think Jim's dead. Yes. He pins, sort of like half of it on her because like he rationalizes this as like, it's her fault for dragging me out here in the first place. If she hadn't just run away. Yeah, it's textbook abuse and manipulation and narcissism. Yeah, we go back to the hospital where the 118 are waiting to hear about Chimney's condition. I think he's in surgery. Eddie shows up. We get a light in the darkness. Light in the darkness. Yeah, this was kind of reminding me of in season 8, episode 10, when Eddie is like the last one to arrive at Chimney's house too. I was just like, oh yeah, it's kind of like that. But I do you think he's in the group chat? So happy. Do you think he's in the group chat? Do you think they just like they never really include him and stuff? They're like, oh yeah, Eddie. No, listen, okay, that's Tommy. Remember? Tommy's not in the group chat. True. You guys, we are recording this episode literally as season 8 episode 11 is airing. We're missing the episode for this, and there have been some rumors flying about what might happen in this episode, whether Tommy will come back. I don't want to say anything because I don't want it to be tragically ironic when we look back on this episode, but let's just say Godspeed. I hope it was an episode. But anyway, I was like really happy to see Eddie, and I was so shocked by his like young, doe-eyed visage. I think it was maybe because we've been, first of all, watching these new season 8 episodes, so it's like I wasn't used to him in this form, but also the last couple episodes have not really had a lot of Eddie in them of season 2. So I was happy to see him. Can we talk about how old everyone looks in the new season compared to season 2? Like, obviously that's just time, and like they've aged 7 years. Yeah, but everyone looks so young. Not in a bad way. Yeah, everyone looks so young. They don't look old in a bad way. But everybody looks extremely young here. Buck looks so like lean, like compared to like how beefy Oliver Stark is now. He's just like a little guy. He twink death led to hunk birth. Yes. And Eddie
I'm sorry, but Eddie's missing that mustache in season 8. I long for it.
Because he looked so good with it. Good. Honestly, like,
and
I'm like
now
looking at his face now.
To me.
It does look bare. It looks like something's really missing.
It's kind of like when those people, you know, those people who get braces and then when they get their braces off, they like still kind of look like they have braces.
Yeah.
He's like that. It's like he was so born to rock the mustache that now he looks naked without it.
But you know, it's interesting.
Anyway.
In season 2, I don't like miss the mustache because like he hadn't had it yet, and also maybe it's just because like his youthful face, like never mind.
He's also got the stubble in season 2, so he doesn't look like completely barefaced.
Yeah, but he does still have that smooth porcelain skin. Oh my god, I just said that and I'm like, wait, we just talked about Ed Gein. Never mind.
I didn't take it in an Ed Gein kind of way, if it makes you feel any better. We basically just see Eddie showing up, and then we see Buck back at Maddie's house talking to the cops. I have to say, this detective he's talking to is being kind of useless.
Oh my god.
Like,
absolutely. He's
Buck
doing that like gruff, like not listening thing. Yeah, Buck is immediately
not the
like
same detective who didn't believe Abby in season 1.
Yeah.
About that wife of the domestic abuser guy.
Yeah, I think it's literally the same guy. I think this is like their go-to, like, yeah, whatever, like flippant
I don't know
detective
why we keep
guy.
calling this guy for these things.
He's tenured.
Because Buck is immediately like, okay, this was obviously Doug. Like, there is one person in the world who wants Maddie dead / wants to kidnap her, and it's Doug. Yeah. And, you know, he even tells the detective, he's like, Chimney had just made this new friend, Jason Bailey, and, you know, this was probably, might have been Doug. And the detective is just kind of like walking with his back to Buck, like clearly not taking him seriously. And it's like, I get that the Jason Bailey thing sounds a little out there, but if you know, I feel like hearing that Chimney had been talking to a new mysterious guy is kind of a relevant detail, and the detective is acting like whatever, there's no way that has anything to do with it.
Yeah, the detective is so like over it. He's like, I'm missing my football and my family dinner for this. It's like, this is your career, dude. Yeah. This is your life's work.
It's your job.
Shouldn't you take it seriously? But Athena is on the scene, thankfully, to act as a middleman. She's sort of talking cop to the guy, and, you know, Bobby's like doing his best to wrangle Buck in. Buck starts to like really crash out at a certain point, and Bobby like tries to calm him down, and he sort of deduces and in part to you know get Buck to chill the fuck out, to chill the Buck out. He deduces that, you know, Maddie, like, I mean, like, if all Doug wanted to do was kill her, she'd be dead, because he tried hard to kill Chimney and just left him there, right? He's not in the business of dumping bodies tonight, which means that for the moment,
like, it seems like Maddie is alive.
She's alive, which gives Buck at least enough of a moment to like breathe and be like, can I please change my shirt? It has Chim's bloody handprint right over my heart. Yeah. I can't operate like this.
Yeah, so he goes and changes into a cute little outfit. He has this white t-shirt with like this dark kind of sheepskin jacket.
Yeah.
And he's just looking like very kind of like 1950s heartthrob, James Dean kind of vibe. I loved it.
I did too. It's so simple, but like he pulls it off so well.
It's a great look on him.
Yeah, gorgeous man.
And then we get Buck in the hospital. He goes straight to the hospital from there. And, one other detail we had just heard is that Chimney's phone was left at the scene, but they're going to need to wait until they can ask Chimney to get permission to look inside his phone, because it's like a chain of command thing. And, you know, Buck's frustrated by that because he's like, well, you know, Maddie doesn't have that time. Like, Chimney's kind of out of commission right now. He won't be able to consent to that for a while. So, you know, right at the end of this scene, Buck has left for the hospital, and the detective is like, wait a minute, where's Chimney's phone?
Yeah, literally.
Cut to Buck is in the hospital.
Oh my god, this fucking scene.
I love this.
He goes up to Chim.
People accuse Buck of being stupid, but he kind of masterminded this.
He did.
Buck
he goes up to Chimney in a coma.
In the ICU.
Yeah.
In the ICU. And starts, you know, it's like a touch unlock.
He's
it's
like,
a
forgive
touch
me for this.
screen lock
Forgive
on
me, Chim,
the-
please.
And then a nurse comes over and she's like, hey, you can't be in here right now. And he decides to play it off by pretending to be like sobbing into Chimney's shoulder.
It's like, please
So
don't
he's,
let
like,
him die.
secretly-
Please save
Yeah,
him.
he's like,
Please don't let
he
him
can't
go.
die. While like furtively putting his, Chimney's thumb on the home button. And then like as soon as he gets it to unlock, he's like, okay, I'm going.
I completely forgot
Performance
of the century. I completely forgot where technology was at this point because I'm so used to my iPhone that's just a screen with like the Face ID and all that like I was so taken aback by like, oh wait, this is probably like an iPhone 6. It still has the home button. It still has the thumbprint as like the way to get into the phone. Like
Yeah, I still have a home button and I don't have face recognition because I have an SE. Those are cheaper.
Period.
And also, I don't really want the face recognition. Like, I don't want my iPhone to know my face bio data.
I have the same like impulse. I just I try to rationalize it to myself. Like, well, am I looking cute today? Because then I want them to see. But I'm just I was thinking after he unlocked the phone, I just had a half-formed thought before it was interrupted. But I'm like, imagine if he accidentally locked it, just muscle memory, and he has to do this again.
I thought about that too. Like when Athena is carrying the phone, I was like, I hope that they just immediately went in and changed the settings to turn off there being a lock, because otherwise, they would have to make sure to keep hitting the screen.
Even just for battery life, these iPhones aren't particularly known for having a long battery life. So mine certainly isn't. Mine is at 25%, and I was at work for 5 hours today, and I was not on my phone at all. So there's that.
Right after he does that, he's like, yes, success. And then Athena walks right in there saying the detective thought I would find you here. Or no, Athena says, I thought I would find you here. The detective didn't believe me. He said, there's no way anyone could be that stupid. I said, you don't know, Buck. But I'm like, come on, it was kind of a mastermind move to use to break in and get his fingerprint. I guess it's true that, the problem with him having done this is that he broke chain of command.
Yeah.
So now that evidence is inadmissible.
Yeah.
But after they lock him in hospital jail, they lock him in hospital jail, as Eddie puts it. Wait, am I getting ahead of myself?
No, you're not. No, you're not getting ahead of yourself. I had a moment because Eddie does show up. It's like a buddy moment, kind of, because I had such a little moment where I took it very literally when he said hospital jail. I know it just meant they had him sequestered in a sort of less populated wing of the hospital and on watch by the cops in the area. But for a moment, I was thinking to myself, does every hospital have a jail area?
A jail? They have a chapel and they have a jail.
A chapel and a jail. Wow. It's you're passing by a wing of a hospital on the way to visit a dying relative, and you're like, oh, that's the jail area. That's where you keep the sickos. Jesus Christ. But yeah, no, Eddie's just flabbergasted with Buck.
We kind of cut to a few minutes later, and Buck has been sequestered in hospital jail. Eddie shows up because, I don't know, they're married, what do you expect? And he kind of they talk a little bit. Buck, great Oliver Stark performance where it's clear he's been crying. He's got these red-rimmed eyes, and he's like, I know, I'm a fuck up, I shouldn't have done that or whatever. And Eddie's like, no, Eddie says, I get it, I have sisters too. And it's like, oh, Eddie's sisters mention, surely we'll see them on the show one day.
I forgot that we still hadn't seen it. So we still haven't met his sisters to this day, have we? Did we meet them at the wedding
them
or
to cover this when they have the Texas storyline? I need it to happen. I need so many things from this potential Texas storyline, and I'm so terrified that I'm not going to get any of them.
Buck sort of feels this sort of incredible sense of responsibility and guilt over Maddie being taken. He's the one that convinced her to stay in LA, etc. He's blaming himself. And Eddie sort of talks some sense into him. I don't remember exactly what he says. I just wrote down Eddie talks some sense into him. So I assume I trust myself in that Eddie did.
Yeah, I trust you as well, because I also didn't write down exactly what he said, but he's trying to encourage
I know what he
him
said. I know what he said. Buck's like talking about like she stayed here because of me, and Eddie, he's saying like, and if she wasn't here, she would have been somewhere else alone, and he still would have found her. And Buck's, he's not really taking that on. He's like, well, she's alone now. Yeah, that's the whole
with Doug
thesis of this scene, as it were. But Athena sort of breaks up the moment, reveals that because Buck broke the chain of custody and unlocked it without Jim's consent, the phone is inadmissible, not just in court, but just to the investigation itself. Like, they can't use it at all. It's just... And so...
I guess it's chain of custody. I've been saying chain of command, and I don't think those are the same thing.
No, they're not.
Take pity on me, audience.
But the phone's inadmissible to the formal investigation with the detectives, with Detective fucking do nothing over here. But Athena Grant is on the scene. Athena Grant is on the scene.
Finally, a useful person. You say what you want about Athena being abusing her power constantly, but at least in this episode, she's kind of abusing it in the right direction,
Finally, we've been praying for this day. She takes the phone as a concerned civilian and friend of the I guess bereaved party. She goes rogue and she takes
the victim, I think
Buck.
You can say.
Yeah, the victim. She goes rogue and she takes Buck with her. But before they can leave, Dad shows up. Dad rolls up to lay some ground rules down for Buck. Bobby's basically just like saying like, don't do anything illegal or would force Athena into early retirement, and it's just like, it's so cute. I love Bobby
says,
and Buck.
Don't lie about anything. Don't withhold any information.
I love Bobby and Buck so much. I love these little moments of like, that's his dad. That's his dad.
That's his dad. Yeah. So I wrote down in my notes, the Athena Buck buddy cop storyline is great.
We need more of that because they're such a fun duo too. They're such a fun duo. I need to see them doing like buddy cop shit, but in like kind of like a lighter storyline than just like Buck's sister is, kidnapped by her abusive soon-to-be ex-husband and in danger of being murdered. And they don't know if she's alive. They don't really get
to do like the fun side of the buddy cop thing.
Yeah, but what if they get hot dogs? Like what if they go on a road trip and get hot dogs?
But we go back to Doug and Maddie driving, and they end up stopping at a gas station. They're kind of low on gas. They're looking for a gas station up ahead. Maddie has this crazy moment in the car where she's like, just do it. Just kill me. And you're like, oh my God. Doug is like, why would I do that? Like, I never want to hurt you. I love you. Classic. He's kind of going back and forth between trying to kind of get her back to trusting him and also, of course, his like warped perception of reality and stuff. Yeah.
There's an incredible moment when Maddie is saying this, where she's telling him to just kill her and all that, like mentions like, you already killed Chimney, kill me, and then we find out that Maddie in season 8 telling that caller to do that thing was not unprecedented, because she also tells I almost said Buck. Fuck. I did it now. Yeah. She almost tells Doug. Oh no, she does tell Doug to kill himself too. It's like,
yeah, she's always had a little bit of that in her, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. I need to know what her Twitter account looks like.
They finally near the gas station, and Doug says, "See, never give up hope." Which we kind of focus on Maddie's face. It's like an ironic thing for him to say right now.
And so they roll in, and as Doug is like getting gas, he gets an abduction alert on his phone. There's a greater LA area abduction alert. A truck rolls up, a whole Tonka truck, and Doug's crashing out, and he kind of sees it roll up, and he's like, spark of an idea. And then we cut back to dispatch. Sue Blevins,
Athena and Buck arriving at the dispatch center.
Sue Blevins introduces Buck and Athena to Josh, and Buck and Josh meet for the first time. Josh has heard so much about Buck. For you, Buck, hashtag Bosch moment.
Hashtag Juck moment.
The spark of love.
The spark of Juck.
The spark of Juck.
Maybe we should call the episode that. Would that be insensitive?
No, that's
what the episode's actually about.
No, that's the title. Because what else are we gonna call it? The Maddie suffers horribly episode, like
the domestic violence special.
But Josh is he's very worried about Maddie, of course, as are they all, and so they're talking. GBF. That's her GBF, and they're talking about like how they can trace a call. If it's a landline, they can trace it directly. If it's a digital call from a cell phone, it's more complicated. They have to formally request the caller's location from the phone company, and they need, I guess, probable cause to do so. It's a bunch of mumbo jumbo that I don't really understand. Whenever people talk about how calls or like data work, I just like start to tune out, because I'm like, that's like one of those things that I feel like man was not meant to understand.
Basically, Athena ends up being like, if I have this number that is hypothetically Doug's, would you hypothetically be able to trace it? And Josh is just kind of like, yeah, totally. And Sue is like, are you sure? Like, the implication is that this would be kind of not what they're supposed to do. This would be kind of outside of what they are officially able to do. But, Josh, it's his bestie Maddie. He's got to do it. So he just goes ahead and traces this cell phone number for them.
Fuck the bureaucracy. Just
yeah,
go.
Seriously.
You have the power to do it. Just do it. Honestly, that seems like the overarching theme of this whole rogue investigation is, fuck the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Let's get her back. Let's bring Maddie home.
It's very like 1980s like action movie where they're like, sometimes the law isn't enough.
Literally.
Like, sometimes you gotta go a little outside your jurisdiction.
Yeah,
this summer, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme.
He's like Kurt Russell in Escape from New York. Like, he's got a cigar in his mouth and like a machine gun in his lap, and he's like, I'll bring her home for you, or like some shit.
Right.
But then we cut back to Maddie in the car, just going back and forth, honestly. And I like the energy of this. They're short scenes, and it keeps the momentum really well.
Yeah.
It just keeps the story moving and flowing at like a really good pace that sort of keeps you engaged.
Definitely.
Maddie is the queen of getting stuck and getting out of it. So she sifts around the cars.
She may be a girl who got stuck, but she always finds her way out.
Always finds a way out. Her wrists are zip tied, and so she searches around in like the glove compartment, doesn't really find anything. So she ends up actually getting out of the car.
Doug is immediately like, where are you going? And she's like, I have to pee. And, Doug is like, well, you could just use this as an excuse to run away. But Maddie's like, where would I go? Look around us. Yeah. And of course, if Doug wants to let her go to the bathroom, he has to cut her zip tie, which he does. And he's like, no funny business, but like, fine, we'll go into the gas station together. Maddie, like, her face is visibly wounded, so obviously when they go in, this looks pretty suspicious to the gas station attendant. If I were him, I would have called 911 right away, but he doesn't. He's just sort of like, keeping an eye on them. Maddie is trying her best to be like, yeah, it feels like we've been driving forever, like trying to act normal. She goes back to the bathroom. Doug is waiting outside for her.
As he hands her the key, it's one of those like big wooden like convenience store bathroom keys that has it has the wooden attachment like to the key to be like restroom and all that, just so that people don't run away with the key and everything. And as he puts it down, she takes it and she grabs his pen that he was using for a crossword. Very very nice subtle moment from Maddie, and Doug doesn't notice it's pen. So she goes to the bathroom and she has this. She grabbed this from the glove compartment. It's important. Sorry, I didn't mention it. She grabbed a piece of paper with like a rental agreement on it or something from the glove compartment, and she goes to the bathroom and she starts to write down a help message on it. I thought what was going to happen was she was going to write down a little help message, fold it up, and then very discreetly, when she's handing back the key to the cashier, slip the message underneath the thing, and then he reads it and calls the cops and whatnot. But I think that would be too easy. Instead, she just sees the window and tries to make a run for it.
And Doug, like, way too early starts getting impatient. Like, you know, she's been in there like 30 seconds and he's like, Maddie, like, come on, get out of there.
No,
and I was like, man, depending on the outfit, I might not even have my pants down.
Dude,
30 seconds after getting
this is his lack of empathy. He doesn't understand how women pee. He's just like, why don't you just whip it out and be done with it?
She could have had to poop, you know?
like seriously, like it takes a while sometimes. But
she should have just said that. She should have been like, Doug, honestly, I'm having like the craziest stress diarrhea right now. Like, just give me a minute.
But she tries to sneak away, like right out the window. She fumbles the landing, as it were, and she gets a little disoriented. And so she has to take a moment to reorient herself. And in that time, he rushes out. He's like got like a psychic third eye for like recapturing her. Because he comes right back around, yells at her, does this whole abusive man thing. And as he's like going to drag her back to the car, the cashier with the gun in the back alley comes out and says, hey, back off, man. That's not cool. Defender of women everywhere. Defender of women everywhere.
Unfortunately, Doug is able to get the gun because I guess he does seem like such a like cold-blooded. He's just like a shark or something. Like, he always can get the upper hand and he will never stop trying to kill you.
Yeah.
So he ends up getting the upper hand. He gets the gun and he shoots the gas station attendant. And, you know, Maddie, the nurse and first responder that she is, like, tries to do some first aid, tries to help him, and Doug just like shoots the guy in the head and kills him. And
like the blood splatters everywhere. Like, Jennifer's acting is amazing in this scene. It's like, oh my god, this show used to be so sauced. Oh my god,
it was sauced.
Bro,
it was goated with the sauce.
It was. This was a goated show. This show is intense. It's like a very like sort of thriller, like I'm not saying like thriller like the Michael Jackson video. I mean, like, you know, it's like a thriller. Like, it's like,
I didn't assume.
So it's a Lifetime moment. Hey, no, it's like genuinely like just a really well done, shocking, sort of chilling, cold blooded moment where Doug just shoots this guy in the head, and it's like, if it wasn't already clear that this guy's just like a blood psychopath, this just like absolutely confirms it.
You have said the phrase blood psychopath so many times in this recording session. Does that like mean something?
It just means a psychopath who's out for blood. It may have a specific meaning. I just associate it with like just like a really cold, cruel man who's willing to hurt and maim and kill anyone in order to get what he wants. I guess it could be a woman doing it. So whatever they want.
I tried Googling it, and the first thing that comes up is a Medium article titled "Do Psychopaths Dream of Blood-Drenched Sheep?" So that's very poetic.
Very poetic. A little on the nose, if I may critique a Medium article for a moment.
The next morning, Hen is regaling Eddie and a bunch of other, like, seemingly non-118 firefighters, or just 118 firefighters, we don't know.
Oh, you know what? They were probably the people that was at Chim's Super Bowl party or whatever that we saw at the end of season 1.
True.
Yeah.
All the random B-shift people.
Exactly.
Hen is regaling them with tales of Chimney's exploits, and she's talking about how when Denny was a baby and Chimney was babysitting him, he like couldn't figure out how to get the baby to go to sleep, so he like went on all these forums and tried all the different advice, like running the vacuum cleaner and having a fan blowing and skin-to-skin contact. And Eddie's really laughing at all this. Eddie has that Eddie look where he has the like super slicked back hair, which is my least favorite Eddie hair look. I felt the same way on Teen Wolf. They used to do this to Liam on Teen Wolf.
Oh, yeah.
Like, why are you giving this like 16-year-old like a 70s mafioso hairstyle?
Yeah. Oh my god, it looked so bad on him. He looked so good. Liam looked so good with like his season 4 hair, or I think like they did like a middle part at one point. I may be confusing him with Theo, but I think they did like a middle part with him at one point, and like that looked really good. It's just the
slicked back hair almost never works for me. Unless you have like a good part in the slicked back hair because that makes it look more like old Hollywood, like kind of like Blaine on Glee, early on, especially when they weren't like slicking his hair completely flat to his head.
I mean,
but
yeah,
on
but
Eddie and
I don't,
Liam,
yeah,
it's a little too much.
It looks like a pineapple with them. Their hair is too straight to be slicked back. I feel like if you're gonna slick your hair like that, it has to have some texture to it in order to like give it some shape, and it doesn't look like, oh, you've got some like some fringes at the top of your head that you just like you're just a pineapple.
Their hair is too straight, and it's also too long, so it like looks like too much hair. And also, like I said, they like haven't put a part into it, so it's just like this big blob of slicked back hair. I already said I loved seeing young Eddie in this episode. I think he looked beautiful, but this is not his best hair look. But luckily, who should show up but Michael, Grant, and Harry.
Speaking of great hair, Michael Grant.
And speaking of repressed gay guys, Michael and Harry show up with coffee and breakfast for all of the firefighters. And Eddie, upon learning this, says to Michael, "We haven't met, but I love you." Which I wrote down. That's an early clue that Eddie is gay.
I wrote down the exact same thing.
We are so on it, you know?
So on it. This was intentional from the start, and we are not mentally ill at all. Totally. Eddie loves Michael, and Bobby comes out. Not like that. Bobby comes out of the other room, and Harry brings him a bear claw. It's his favorite. He gets a bear claw. And Bobby's kind of waffling on, like, I'm using the word waffling a lot today. I'm gonna use a different word. Bobby's kind of like sort of ruminating, if you will, on what to tell Chim when he wakes up. He doesn't really know what he's gonna tell him, hence like just tell him the truth, you know. But like, how horrible would that be to wake up from this kind of like, is he in a coma or is he just like unconscious? What's the medical difference?
He's just unconscious, because it seems like he was asleep for like less than 24 hours.
Yeah, I think he was just
he actually mentions at the end of the episode that there was no coma this time, so it definitely wasn't a coma.
Okay, never mind. I think I just see people asleep in a hospital bed for an extended period of time and like, oh my god, it's a coma. I'm not a doctor.
Yeah, I actually go into a mini coma every night for approximately 8 hours.
Damn, 8 hours. That's a long time. I got 5. Actually,
no,
I didn't even get 5.
I was getting 8 hours. I'm usually getting like 6 to 7 at best. Yeah, so Hen implores Bobby to just tell Chimney the truth, whatever that turns out to be.
Bobby talks to Michael. You know, Michael says something about Harry was really concerned. Bobby's like, oh, that's really sweet that Harry was concerned for Chimney. And Michael says, no, Bobby. Harry was actually worried about you. It's like, oh, yeah. Bobby's in the family. Yeah.
Stepdad Bobby. He's the dad who stepped up.
Yeah, we go from there to Athena. She's in the car with Buck, and she's on the phone. She calls Detective Marks Andy. So they seem to have a sort of familiarity between them.
So yeah, Athena's giving them the info they got at the dispatch center. And that's all I wrote about this scene, so I don't remember if anything else happens in it.
I got some stuff because Athena, like, Marks is like curious about where she got all this information. She says Sue Blevins is going to give you a call with this and that amount of information. Just consider it an anonymous tip, and we'll just agree not to look into it. Thank you, goodbye, and hangs up. And next to her, Buck is going through it. I love seeing Buck just being absolutely, you know this about me, I love seeing Buck just like being put through the ringer, tortured, just like just in every kind of pain imaginable. I love it. And he's very worried about Maddie's safety, of course, as are we all. But Athena believes in Maddie, you know. Maddie, you know, she says Maddie's not just she didn't just, you know, rebuild her life. She rebuilt herself. You know, this is a new person than the person that she was before. And Doug doesn't really know who he's dealing with. It's like, yes,
right,
yes, you're so right. Speak on that. Speak on our diva. Thank you, Athena.
It's very true. And it's like Athena has witnessed Maddie's prowess firsthand. Like, if you remember the Awful People episode, she saw Maddie like really step up, no pun intended, and you know, save that guy in the field. So it's very like Athena knows that Maddie is a very competent person and that Doug should not count her out just yet.
Cut again to Maddie's in the car the next day, and Doug like beat the shit out of her. She's got bruising all over her face. She's got cuts on her face. It is really, really grisly. And
they're also like driving through the desert at this point, so it seems like they've gotten pretty far out of like Southern California, presumably.
Yeah, it's like Blaine County and they're bordering Nevada or something. And
I don't know what that means, but sure.
And you know, as they're driving, you know, Doug is getting antsy. It's very clear he doesn't see a way out of this either. This plan, if one can call it that, is very short-sighted, very rash, as you know, abusive men often are. And
yeah, at one point a police car actually shows up behind them, like sirens on, speeding, like seemingly maybe about to pull them over, and you see Maddie kind of get her hopes up for a second, and then the car just speeds up and passes them, like on its way to another situation. And it's like such a gut punch, I will say.
Yeah,
and
it is.
You know, then Maddie starts really trying to talk Doug into just like figuring out a more solid plan. It's not really clear if she like still has a long game at this point or if she means what she's saying. Presumably she still is playing the long game.
Oh yeah, I think she's definitely like, placating him, using her sort of, especially kind of using her first responder training to take some level of control of the situation. She tells him, we have to get off this road, there's cameras everywhere.
You have no plan.
Yeah, you have no plan. They're gonna find the body of that guy. They're going to check the security cameras on the gas station. They're gonna link that car to this one. If you don't get off the main road, they're gonna find us soon, in part because I also think there is an underlying sort of feeling that like Maddie knows that if Doug gets caught, he's going to kill her and then himself, you know, and she doesn't want to die, you know, and so as much as she is sort of like placating him to take control of the situation, she's also doing it to stop him from shooting the both of them in the face. And
definitely
this I actually think was when I wrote down that it's crazy that they're married in real life, because the drive home from the shoot that day must have been interesting. I would really love, and this is like my genuine curiosity, I would really love to know how you approach it as a married couple in that sense, and sort of the steps you take to sort of care for each other in that moment. Obviously, they're both professional actors. They both know the game, and presumably they both know how to separate themselves from their roles. Jennifer probably especially, because she's worked so extensively in horror movies. So I am just very curious about sort of the strategies that they use to decompress and to sort of, I guess, compartmentalize in that way. It's something that I feel like is kind of a question at the core of a lot of those like tweets that you see of like, you know, how do actors not fall in love after a really intimate love scene?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think especially in TV, it's not like they're spending like months and months like method acting and getting into character and stuff. I would assume that it's just, you have your ways to decompress and to kind of remove yourself from literally being in that situation. And I would think that they can cope with it.
Yeah. A lot of the actors that I know in my life actually practice sort of like a very sort of holistic sort of getting into character process where they do a lot of sort of yogic meditation, and they do a lot of work to sort of separate the impulses of their body and sort of their natural sort of senses from their own personas. I think the way that I've seen it described in some acting classes has been kind of Freudian, with like the id and the superego and whatnot. Yeah,
kind of just like separating yourself.
Yeah, it's a really cerebral process that you wouldn't necessarily think about just like watching a show. But actors put like especially like in these kinds of scenes, put like a lot of work into this sort of thing. It's very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the actor, I'm sure, but like I always, whenever I would like do theater acting as like a teenager, I always fully, it was like so vibes based. I would just be like, you just like say your lines as convincingly as you can. And then like when I was going to school for film and like you're working with actors, you're like, oh, they like have all these things that they learn how to do. And like, you know, I remember a classmate had made a film where somebody had to cry, and so they found this actor who was one of those people who uses like emotional triggers and stuff to like make themselves cry.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my god, I could never do that shit.
Oh my god, ever. Like, that sounds like the most like draining sort of thing. Like, imagine like re-traumatizing yourself by thinking of the most horrible thing to ever happen to you in order to access a scene about being sad about your dog or something.
Yeah, that's what that classmate said. They were like, you know, what we learned is like you have to make sure to like do scenes like that like at the end of a shoot day, because you know it's like a very exhausting process. You can't necessarily ask that actor to like keep working after that.
Yeah, 100%. So,
I would guess on TV. I read a book once about the production of EastEnders because I have mental problems, and I read that on a show like that they just use like tear stick, whatever that's called, where they like rub a thing
the
under
menthol
your eyes
cry
and
stick,
it makes you cry. Yeah, it's kind of like Vaseline or something. And I would think that on most network TV they do that too, because it's like the turnaround time. I think the reason they do that on EastEnders is it's this soap opera that releases an episode practically every day. So like you just don't have time to have actors like going to that place and, you know, accessing these deep parts of themselves all the time. You just need to get the shot. So I would guess that there's at least, maybe there are some actors that like choose not to use that, but I would think, like, I almost had that thought in the scene where Buck earlier looks like he's been crying. I was like, you know, not that Oliver Stark isn't a great actor, but, you know, because they have to do a bunch of takes and they have to get the day done, I wouldn't be surprised if they just like used the crying stuff to make him look like that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I do think the menthol cry stick is sort of like, it does have a very soap opera-y, like we're out at 5 kind of connotation with it in a lot of like entertainment spaces. Like, I can't speak to like film or TV, but like in theater, like the menthol cry stick is like very much stigmatized as like borderline steroids.
Sure.
Borderline steroids. It's like you're taking a shortcut.
I think in theater there's an expectation that you wouldn't really be doing that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But on TV, although I have to say, I feel like Jennifer Love Hewitt might just be like a natural crier, because I can't imagine she's like using that every time she cries on a call. I feel like maybe she just has the power to turn that on and off whenever she wants.
No, I definitely agree. I mean, she's a scream queen. I feel like she has such a great ability to access her emotions, access terror, access fear, access sadness. That's like it's really remarkable, honestly.
I was just thinking about that the other day. I think when I was watching the latest 911 episode as of recording this, where I was like, it's kind of crazy that she was like a child actress and grew into such a good actress, because I feel like you often don't see that with child actors, where like, I mean, it's kind of like one or two scenarios. Like, one, they weren't a very good child actor, but then they grew up and like actually got some skill or accessed some talent that they weren't really able to as a kid. Or a lot of the time you see like kids who are good actors because they were sort of uninhibited or maybe not thinking about it very much. And then they grow up and they're actually not able to be very good actors.
Yeah.
Because it turns out maybe they either didn't have a lot of natural talent or just like aren't really sure how to access it anymore. And so I always think it's impressive.
We call those the Kim Richards crowd, or perhaps maybe the Cole Sprouse crowd, if you will.
Damn, the Cole Sprouse shade. 5 Feet Apart is a cinematic masterpiece. Just kidding. It's not. But I think it's always impressive when you see someone who made that transition from child actor to like genuinely good adult actor. It just shows like, wow, like maybe you really were like born to do this.
Yeah, I think Joseph Gordon-Levitt is another really good example of that. Like, he's so good, because he's like so good at like doing both like comedy and drama. Like, Jennifer Love Hewitt, I feel like is like really good at just like basically like every range of like human emotion, which is why
she's just like a born performer.
I know.
She kind of reminds me of like an old Hollywood. She's like Judy Garland.
She is.
Where like from the second she was born, she could sing and dance and act, and just like her talent was incandescent her whole life.
Yeah,
you know?
Which is why it gets so depressing sometimes looking at her filmography, and it's like, girl, we are rooting for you so hard, but you need a better agent. Like, 911 is is like the peak of your adult performing career. I'm sorry to say.
I mean, I think she made that transition into TV at some point wisely, because you know, the film roles were just getting kind of weird. I wonder if she had trouble like finding a niche that worked for her in movies.
Yeah, because like she was a teenage scream queen in horror movies, and like that's like a great niche to have when you're that age.
But who were like I don't envy actresses who were like entering their 30s in like the mid 2000s.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you're getting to the age where like you're not like the young scream queen, and like still super young, obviously, but like where you're not like, you know, I Know What You Did Last Summer aged anymore, but it's still the mid 2000s, and the only roles for women under like 50 are like, you know, you have to be like the hot young woman in like a rom-com, unless you're like a super like indie whatever, like a more arty kind of actor.
Yeah.
So
That's
I
a
feel
good
like you
point,
look at her
actually.
filmography. I feel like you look at her filmography and you can see sort of the struggle of like just a woman of that age trying to find a niche. Like now, I think we're lucky to see there actually are more roles, at least now, for people in sort of, I don't want to say middle-aged, because like being in your late 30s, I feel like is not quite middle-aged, but you know, that age of actress, I feel like you see more opportunities now.
No, I definitely agree with you. I mean, like, you see like Christina Ricci like is still dominating screens and everything, and like she's been working in this industry for like 20 something years. But then like you think about like what happened with like Gina Davis, and like how hard like her career fell off after like maybe 2 bad movies, even though she was like the most critically acclaimed actress of like the 80s and early 90s.
You have like one box office flop, and even though you're just the actor and you literally didn't make the movie, didn't write the movie, didn't direct the movie, it nukes your career. Like, that's so unfair. Why did she have to take the fall for Cutthroat Island?
I know. Oh my god, don't get me started. I feel like actually a really interesting sort of like analog to Jennifer on like a similar sort of like time scale would maybe be like Chloe Sevigny, who like started as like, where Jennifer was like sort of mainstream horror icon. Chloe was like very much like sort of the underground sort of artistic it girl. And as they both transitioned into the 2000s, they both still struggled to find sort of like a niche. Chloe stayed in film for a while. They both stayed in film for a while, and they pursued different kinds of roles, but eventually around the same time frame, they both sort of transitioned into television. Chloe, you know, got like acclaim working on like American Horror Story. Jennifer got this amazing role on 911, and they've managed to carve out sort of niches for themselves once again in pop culture in their sort of late 30s, in their early 40s, as people who have managed to maintain their star and their celebrity, finding work in different avenues, being just really just genuinely incredible performers, actors, just really taking their craft seriously.
Well, that's sort of what I mean, is like that is an actress who definitely was more on like the indie side of things, and like I don't know everything about her career, so like maybe she did struggle, but like it seems like she was able to maybe find more roles because she was in like more of that niche, whereas like Jennifer Love Hewitt was a really mainstream actress, and it was like hard to find, it seems like, mainstream role.
Oh, and don't forget her starring role as Liz in Garfield the movie and its sequel, Garfield: A Tale of Two Kitties.
A Tale of Two Kitties. See, straight up, like her most profitable movies in the 2000s, like after I Know What You Did Last Summer, was the Garfield movies.
Yeah.
And isn't that sad?
Jesus Christ. Oh, poor Jennifer.
It looks like she tried to branch out in a couple independent movies and then just kind of went right into TV, which I think was the right choice.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. It seems like if you're like an actress who is kind of aged out of like this sexist, it's a sexist system, but if you've kind of aged out of like the like young woman roles in the mid 2000s, like you could still get a role on like a Lifetime show or a Lifetime movies.
To wrap up the Jennifer Love Hewitt career tangent, yes,
I hope you cut a large amount of that out.
Very large, substantial portion of that. Believe me, this episode will be under 2 hours if it kills me.
Yay!
But
that's all I ask.
Yeah, so basically, Maddie convinces Doug to turn back because she saw an off-ramp leading to Big Bear. I don't know what Big Bear is. I think it's like a public park with like cabins and stuff.
I looked it up. It's a lake.
Oh.
So I assume they are talking about like a Big Bear resort of some sort with like cabins.
Yeah, and so
it's a mountain resort. Yeah,
and it's remote and everything. It's in the mountains. It's like tucked away. You know, he mentioned something about like the Poconos. Oh, the Poconos. We're from the Northeast. We'll go to the Poconos to hide out.
I think they're saying, I think they are implying that they went there for their honeymoon.
It's got the dual appeal of, like for Doug's ego, of course, of hiding from the cops and recreating sort of the initial spark of love, as it were, of their romantic honeymoon. Doug even says when they go to the convenience store, they're on their, quote, second honeymoon. So this is a real homecoming for him. But then as Doug's basically pulling a Yui, we cut to Chim wakes up in the hospital, and who should be there beside him, waiting for him to wake up, but little Christopher. Oh,
so cute.
So cute.
Oh, it's so cute
he
that
says,
he
"Hi,
showed
Chim."
up.
Oh, my God.
He's just sitting in a chair. And, of course, Christopher has also spent a lot of time in hospitals. So, you know, he asks Chimney about his surgery, and Chimney's like, yeah, I guess I'm catching up to you.
Oh.
And, you know, he says, or no, Bobby comes in and he's like, wow, look who's awake. And then he's like, does your dad know you're in here, to Christopher? And Eddie runs in like, Christopher, what are you doing? So, you know, Bobby's like, I'm gonna say no.
Yeah.
Eddie's like, maybe we should let Chimney get some rest. And Christopher's like, don't eat the meatloaf. They're like bonding over spending a lot of time in hospitals.
Christopher like lost a tooth to the meatloaf. Oh, I love that kid.
To be fair, he's a child, so it might have just been a super loose tooth that would have come out in any piece of food.
I love that. What I love about Christopher is that like the lines that they give him, he talks like a little adult. He talks like a little young man. It's so sweet.
I love it. He's so cute.
He's got like the wit and charm of like a 60s smooth talker. Like, it's so funny.
Well, we do find out later in the show that he's like a ladies' man, and we also find out that he's very smart. Like, he continues to be very like academically engaged. So he's probably just a prodigy on many levels.
Yeah, but you know, Chimney, he asks Bobby once Eddie clears Chris out of the room. He asks Bobby, like, where's Maddie? That certainly seems the question on everyone's lips, because Athena catches up with the big rig that Doug was making eyes at. Turns out he dumped his phone on the truck to throw them off his trail.
Yeah.
And Doug is apparently way ahead of them and could be anywhere with Maddie by this point. Obviously, we know where they are, so there's a bit of dramatic irony going on. But it's like a moment of like, all hope is lost for Buck. And
yeah, Athena is really not even trying to like shield Buck's emotions at all, because Buck's like, so they could be anywhere, and Athena's like, yeah, and they are like 10 steps ahead of us or something. And it's like, okay, you could, you know, reassure him a little bit, but you could be like, you know, we're gonna keep looking.
But we gotta give Angela the one-liner. She's so good at them.
True.
Yeah,
it reminds me of that episode. It's like the second episode when the dogs in the house, when she accidentally lets the burglar get away, and she says like, you've been robbed and I let him get away.
It's like, you didn't really have to say that for your career, but you know, it's a damn good line.
Watch what you say, maybe.
It's a damn good line. And then,
but oh my god,
Shannon
we cut to
moment.
I totally forgot she was in this episode. I had no idea this was coming. I wrote in my notes, all caps, Shannon is in this episode. I jumped, I screamed, I cheered. And she's being wonderful. She's being lovely, my beautiful princess. She has brought pizza for all the firefighters. I guess it just struck me as crazy, because surreal, I should say, because I feel like this is one of the only moments prior to, let's say, Shannon's last episode where we see her like just being around in Eddie and Christopher's life. Like, that feels so out of place, because that's so like not how we remember her. And so it was just jarring. It was like seeing someone in a dream, or like seeing a loved one who has died or something.
No, I totally agree, especially since it's like, it's golden hour, the sun's coming through the windows, there's like boxes of pizza everywhere, and it's like and it does feel sort of like a sort of a dreamlike sort of moment in time, out of time almost.
Yeah.
Also, I gotta say,
it's so beautiful and thought-provoking.
I gotta say, speaking of things that are beautiful and thought-provoking,
I don't spend a large portion of my day thinking about like beautiful women, just being a gay man myself. But the absolute reverence and sort of I guess for lack of a better word, lust you have for Shannon Diaz, it's rubbing off on me, because like she came up on screen and I was like, oh my god, she just looks radiantly beautiful.
Well, once you start noticing it, she's just a very, very beautiful person, I think. And it's like that effortless beauty that she has. I don't know. I'm not trying to be weird, you guys. I don't like that you called it lust, because my love for her is completely pure and innocent. I just think she's very beautiful. And it's like her acting too. I think it's just because like there are lots of beautiful actresses out there. But I feel like she just has this like really grounded, natural, kind of likable affect. And that's why it's so crazy to me that so many people don't like her, because I'm like, how could you? She's like an angel.
She has such a sweetness about her. Like you just really love her in this role. But we go out of that moment, out of time, to one moment in time. Buck is talking with sort of like the cops, as it were, to think about like what to do. They're brainstorming.
They're at the gas station now.
Yeah.
They've like caught up to the gas station event.
What's his face? Detective Do Nothing is there, and presumably they found the body behind, the station. And I think they get the plate numbers from the security camera. But they don't have a way of like tracking the car. But then Athena suggests, maybe they actually do. Buck's like, oh, LoJack. But Mr. Useless is over here like, most rental cars don't have a GPS feature. It's too expensive and not really worth it. And Athena, voice of reason, says if it's a major company, if it's a major rental company like Budget or whatever, but if it's Grandpa Joe's used car lot, rent him for $500 a day, and he only has 12 in circulation, he probably wants to keep track of them. And Doug seems to have rented from such a dealer.
Yeah, it's an oddly detailed breakdown of rental car companies and whether or not they use GPS.
Yeah, like I didn't know that. Did you know that? I didn't know that.
Feels... I didn't, but now I know.
Now we know.
So
we
they've got a new lead on their guy, essentially, that they might be able to track down the rental car, which would be big.
Yeah.
And then we get Doug and Maddie showing up at a cabin in Big Bear.
Yeah.
They have just they haven't checked in officially, obviously. They've just kind of broken into a random cabin.
Yeah, you couldn't tell if they didn't check in because he kicks the door down.
Yeah, you could say that. Doug's like, okay, I'll start a fire in the fireplace. And Maddie is like, I'll go see if I can get some food. And Doug is like, in the kitchen where the knives live? I don't think so.
Where the knives live.
So I guess she's just got to sit in the living room.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they start kind of they start reminiscing really about their honeymoon in the Poconos and how apparently Doug forgot to open the flue in the fireplace, and smoke got in the place and they had to pay all these cleaning fees. It's kind of funny that Maddie brings that up because it feels like finally getting back at him a little bit for his stupid needling.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, Doug, maybe you did a stupid thing.
And then he mentions all he remembers from that is the cleaning guys flirting with his wife while he
I think the firefighters, he says that
right.
Firefighters had to show up, and these hick firefighters were laughing at the dumb city boy, and they were flirting with my wife. It really lays bare his kind of delusional state of mind where, like these people often are, he's just so paranoid about, everybody's flirting with my wife and she's always thinking about cheating on me and whatever.
In his mind's eye, he's remembering all of those firefighters as just 5 chimneys. It's just chimney, 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 chimney. And they're all like, yeah. Hey, Maddie, how's it going?
Which I must say, that's kind of a confusing thing to say because we are also talking about a fireplace chimney like a literal one.
No, yeah, it is. I just realized that. But he has this way of like working himself up. You know what I mean? He has this way of like working himself up, and it's
again,
like, and then
it's kind of tying back to that same thing earlier in the episode where, you know, Doug is the one who knocked over the champagne glass, but he blames it on Maddie. It's kind of this thing of like, he's like making up a fictional version of Maddie in his head to get mad at, right? A scenario that didn't really happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And he also has this crazy line where he says, "What is it with women? They get all weak-kneed around a man in uniform," which is like alluding to her relationship with Chimney. And she brings up, you know, I married a guy who wears scrubs. And he's like, yeah, I guess I'm kind of a man in uniform. It's like, yeah, Doug, your worldview doesn't make any sense.
No, seriously. I mean, it's such a little moment. It's such a little moment of like, you know, this guy's so mad that his toy got taken away. So they give him a consolation toy to placate him while he vents his steam or whatever.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But flashback. And we
get a little flashback sequence. To like a couple years ago, presumably, maybe even as little as a year ago, of a cop showing up at Maddie and Doug's door, like at their house. And Maddie answers the door. She looks pretty shaken. She's got like this kind of telltale turtleneck sweater on, presumably to like hide bruises on her body. And this cop is saying, you know, we got a call about like a disturbance over here. We're trying to, you know, is everything okay? And Maddie's like, kind of unconvincingly is like, oh no, everything's fine. There must have been a mistake. You know, nothing's been happening here. Yeah. And he kind of tries to ask, like, are you in any danger? You know, if something's going on, you can tell me. Doug comes to the door and he's like, what's going on? And this cop, like the one good cop in the 911 universe,
it's the one good cop,
is like, he can obviously tell what's going on here. So he lies to Doug. He says, oh, we have been hearing about some car thefts in the neighborhood. Wanted to know if you guys had heard anything. And Doug's like, no, that's terrible. We haven't heard anything. And he kind of turns to leave. And the cop like asks Maddie, like, hey, can you just like sign this last thing for us? And he kind of pulls her close and he's like, you know, you can leave, essentially. He's like, he tells her this very poignant thing about like, I know you're worried about what will happen if you leave, but you should be worried about what will happen if you stay. Essentially.
It is a very well done scene, although reflecting on it, it does kind of feel like a turn to camera moment where he's like, women in this situation, don't be afraid to run. You have the power. And
it's true. And also, I think something like that is kind of welcome in a storyline like this, at least in like a network TV show. It's kind of like sometimes in sensitive episodes of television when then they'll have the little thing at the end where the actor is speaking right to the camera and they say, if you or someone you know is struggling with an eating disorder, you can call the hotline at whatever, you know? Yeah. It's like that.
I do agree. I do think it's funny coming out of the mouth of a cop, just like looking at like the national statistics that we have. It's like, it's like,
don't look up 60% cops or whatever.
40%. It's 40%. Yeah.
For some reason in my head it was 66%, but yeah, I guess that's wrong.
2/3. That would be insane.
You gotta hand it to them. Only 40% of cops beat their wives.
Only 2/5 of cops beat their wives. Yes. And Doug is, you know, being very domineering. He's a monster. We cut back to the present day, and he's very unsubtly sort of threatening Maddie, and so she very subtly backs up to the fireplace, the chimney, if you will. And as she's half turned away, she discreetly grabs the fire poker and she discreetly jams the fire poker right into his face really hard and then runs.
That part is less discreet. She's like trying to like, you know, she's playing it very smart again. She's like, yeah, maybe we can start over. And then she just really gets him on the head with the fire poker. Yeah, she leaves the house, runs out into the snow, and a chase scene ensues.
There is that moment of frustration watching where it's like, no, finish the job. But like you also
the job.
But you also understand watching, it's like
she might not have gotten like an opportunity to finish the job.
Yeah. And also he's got a gun. So
he's got a gun, exactly.
Yeah. And
running. You know, I heard once that if you're ever in a situation where you're being threatened with a gun, like, apparently you have a pretty good chance if you just run away. Like, most people don't have very good aim.
Yeah.
And even if they do, like, if you're running away, it's just kind of hard to hit you reliably with a bullet.
Yeah,
so,
you're a
like,
moving target. You know, it's like, what are they going to do? Get like a point blank shot? No, it's not going to. Yeah. So it was smart of her to do this.
I don't know. I just I heard that once, that like versus like a knife fight or whatever. Like if you're being threatened with a gun, it can actually be pretty effective to just run away.
Yeah. And like as Maddie's running, there's snow everywhere. She's running across this, like, it looks like a dam, and it's so stark. It's so like well shot. It's just, oh god, it's gorgeous. Right. It's a gorgeous, very intense scene.
Shout out to Millicent.
Shout out to Millicent.
Shout out to our director, Millicent.
Okay. And as Maddie's running, Doug's shooting after her and yelling, Maddie! His face is bleeding. It's crazy. Like, this, like, shit's going down.
Yeah,
this is the third act. Good. She got him really good.
She got him good with the fire poker. Good for her.
Yeah.
But we cut back to Chimney and Hen in the hospital. Chimney has just found out that Jason Bailey was actually Doug, and of course he's really beating himself up about it. He's like, you know, how could I let him into my life? And, you know, he had no way of knowing, which is what Hen tries to get him to understand. But of course he's going to feel guilty for, you would feel like disgust, I'm sure, realizing that you like accidentally made nice with somebody like that.
Oh my god, absolutely. Especially like the abuser of like the person you're falling for. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like a little moment of like Chim guilt, and then we cut right back to Maddie running through the woods, the Force Awakens woods. And she's,
I wrote in my notes, so Lifetime movie core. Like,
period.
So many Lifetime movies end with a woman running through the snowy woods away from an attacker.
Yes. And the snowy woods are a great setting for it. I love the snowy woods. Like,
totally.
In any story, honestly, I will always take it. It seems like a bitch to film in, don't get me wrong, but
I'm sure.
Was all over season 2 of Yellow Jackets, and that was one of the reasons for it. But she's running for her life. He is bleeding like a motherfucker, and it is very intense. I am just obsessed with this.
At this point, we're kind of like rapidly going between scenes, because then we cut back to Buck and Athena. It's kind of a fun episode where we see them like kind of quickly like get on the trail of Maddie and Doug, and so now they've gotten to Big Bear, and they're like asking kind of the front desk person, like, has anybody checked in? And she says no, of course, because as we know, Doug just kicked in the door of one of the cabins. So, you know, they're still pretty sure that Maddie and Doug are here. So they ask, like, well, how many cabins do you have? And the lady's like, 300.
300 properties. How is that manageable?
To manually search each one.
Yeah.
But that's what they decide to do.
Back to the woods, and Doug is literally following her footsteps. She is like through the snow, yelling after her. And she notices, like he says, like, you'll never get away if you keep running. And she notices the footsteps, and so she starts backtracking. This is why I'm saying it's a Shining reference. Jack in the maze, running after Danny.
Oh,
right. Yelling. He's wounded. She starts backtracking on her footsteps, and it works. She manages to disorient him because the trail runs cold. He yells, "You fucking backtracking bitch," or whatever. And then she hits him once again with the fire poker. At this point,
she does once again the most Lifetime thing she could have done. She sneaks up behind him and hits him over the head with the poker. Literally a good Lifetime drinking game. Finish your drink every time, like at the climax of the movie, the main character sneaks up behind the villain and hits them over the head with a heavy thing.
Yeah, and so she does that very Lifetime move of hitting him over the head. And this is the moment where I was more so like, no, finish the job. Like, I got her running out of the cabin, but like, she's got him where she wants him at this point. I understand it's a emotionally difficult thing to do, but like, he's on the ground. You got the jump on him. Just fucking drive that shit into his head.
Because I'm not sure we mentioned it, but like, Doug had shot after her a few times and ran out of bullets. So he's kind of lost his most deadly weapon. He has a knife. There's a shot where like he runs out of bullets, immediately pulls out the knife, because of course. But like at this point, now that she's snuck up behind him and hit him with the poker, they kind of get into their like real like hand-to-hand final showdown.
Yeah.
She like hits him again. Doug slashes her in the leg. He stabs her. She like hits him with a log. She kicks him. She scratches him. He punches her. I wrote this all down in my notes.
Yeah. She bites him too.
She bites his hand to get the knife back, and then she gets it and she just stabs him over and over again until he's dead. Oh, it feels good.
It feels so good. This scene is so intense, so well choreographed, so well shot. And it's like, imagine, I keep saying this, especially because we're hot off the heels of recording that bonus episode. Imagine them doing a scene like this on 911 today.
I know, this one is so like believably messy, you know, the way they're like both just like slashing and kicking and biting at each other. It's not just like, I slit your throat and now you come up and hit me with a hammer and now I almost shoot you, but the cops shoot me first and then it's over. It's like, there's actually a lot of things going on and it feels like this realistic fight to the death.
Yeah, all of the
Maddie
action in the show.
Canonically stabbed a man to death.
Yes. And oh my fucking god, he fucking dead. God, all of the action on the show nowadays feels so written, but this is just so perfectly messy. It's so good.
Yeah.
And after she fucking stabs his ass, she starts to close her eyes fall shut because she
kind of starts fading out.
She's been injured. She's been stabbed. She might be bleeding out too. Also, shout out
and
to
probably just
all
like
of
the
those
adrenaline fading, like you could pass out.
All of those those man tweets, if you will, about like seeing like a dark snowy field and being like, imagine bleeding to death here. It's, that's what I was thinking of.
And you know who's actually done it? Maddie Buckley. But she, right as she's kind of fading out, she has this flashback to her at home the same night that cop showed up at her door. After coming inside, after talking to the cop, Doug, of course, materializes and he's like, I heard what that cop said to you. Like, don't lie to me. And then he says, but guess what, Maddie? Like, you're never getting out because we're meant to be together. And he says, we're meant to live together, to grow old together, and to die together. That's how this story ends. And remembering this, you know, prompts Maddie to realize that she doesn't want that to be how this story ends. Yeah. So she gets up and she powers through. She rallies.
It's so good. It's just this moment of determination. And and it's just like, no, Maddie, you are not going to die there. You are going to live. You're going to live. It's like, oh my God, you're rooting for her. Everyone's like cheering. You're like, yes, Maddie, yes. And then
we cut back to Buck and the cops searching through the cabins in Big Bear. Fortuitously, they apparently have found the exact cabin that Doug and Maddie were in, because Athena's like, somebody's definitely been here. And Buck just like runs out into the wilderness to look for Maddie.
Yeah, they get like a moment. There's like, they find blood and stuff, and he just shoots off.
Yeah. It's exciting because, like, you know, like we've said, you have had these two storylines going on like back and forth throughout the episode, and now they're like getting so close to converging. So Buck runs out into the wilderness to look for Maddie. We see Maddie is now like trekking through the snow while injured, and Buck sees her and she like sees him just like barely out of like her blurred vision, and she's like so surprised to see him because of course like it must like feel like she's dreaming or something to see that her brother has just shown up here to save her.
Yeah, the way she exclaims like Buck, like it's like a question, but it's also like a wail. It's so heartbreaking. It's so perfectly performed.
They run to each other and they get to each other, and she just says like, I didn't give up. And this was when I started crying.
Yep.
And I kind of didn't stop crying for the rest of the episode.
Yep. I cried the way I cried. That's such a great line. I didn't give up. It's just, oh my god. And
both of them are like acting so hard.
They're acting. This is like a life bond scene. Like I wouldn't be surprised if like Oliver and Jennifer like stayed in touch for the rest of their lives because of this scene alone. And like it reminded me so hard of the fact that they are like brother and sister in this moment. Like you kind of sometimes watching, I kind of forget that Buck and Maddie are brother and sister because they are separated by age, because they don't share so many scenes together. Maddie's often paired with Chimney. Buck's often paired with Eddie, which could mean nothing. And so like
no, dude, that's his brother. That's his platonic brother.
And it's like, no, this is
Ryan Guzman would say.
This is his sister. This is his sister. And it's like it's just like such a like affirming moment for them and for life, and it's so beautiful. I feel like Grace Randolph in this moment. I'm like, it was so touching and just like so damn it. Like she fought like
so
hell.
Like that
dude.
kind of reaches its climax and you know, finally like Maddie is safe. And then we cut to Athena talking to Do Nothing Detective Do Nothing. And meanwhile, some other cops are like zipping Doug into a body bag, which like, yas. Finally.
Bag him up.
And as they're talking to each other, you know, this dumbass cop is like, oh, it's like a miracle. And Athena says, that was no miracle. That woman fought like hell. And it's like, yeah, what do you know, stupid cop who doesn't know anything?
Yeah, and then we get this gorgeous tracking shot of the wambulance, and it's going through the mountains, and it's such a beautiful drone shot, by the way, I will say, just following them along. We don't get so many shots like this in the show anymore. Another travesty.
No, we don't get anything in the show anymore.
It's so cinematic. This episode is so...
Watch me say that, and then like the episode that aired tonight was like complete buddy canon or something.
This episode is so cinematic. Totally I'm sorry. It is. Yeah. But inside the ambulance, Buck is keeping her awake. And they're like, they're just like sharing like little like brother sister like little like moments of like levity inside of the horrors, and
finally Buck is like everybody's gonna be so relieved, you know, Chimney is gonna be so relieved, and Maddie is like, Chimney's alive. Like, she didn't even know that he was alive this whole time. She just thought he was dead. And like her delivery of that line, I was crying again.
And if that wasn't...
I wrote in my notes, all caps, I'm crying again.
And if that wasn't gonna fucking like get you, the fucking make you feel my love needle drop, are you kidding me?
The Adele version.
Are you kidding me? The fucking make you feel my love needle drop right as I'm already sobbing to make it 10 times worse. It was the perfect concoction for me. Yeah. It was, oh my God. We go from that to Chimney in his hospital bed. He's sitting up.
Finally, the tension has dissipated.
Okay. Yeah.
Finally, the tension has dissipated, and we get back to Chimney. It's been about 3 days because a nurse, I think, mentions that. Yeah. And, you know, the nurse is like, well, like, your friend is visiting you today. Like, maybe you can talk to your friend about it. And who should show up but Maddie, being pushed in a wheelchair because this is a hospital. And, you know, she's beat up, but she's alive. Yeah. And she's visiting Chimney. And
they're going to heal together.
I just wrote, all caps, Maddie. Peak Maddie.
This is why Maddie is the best couple. Okay, this is why Maddie is the best couple. Like, it's not a competition. It's a blowout. Maddie is one of the best couples I've seen in fiction. Okay, well, maybe...
It's true. It's like, you know what? I actively ship Buddy more, but, like, if we're being honest, Buddy's never gonna surpass Maddie. I'm sorry.
My
like,
God.
In terms of the clarity of the writing here.
Yeah.
I hate to say it. I don't think that's I don't think that's that much of an unpopular opinion.
I don't think so.
It's like...
it's like Maddie is like... First of all, it's the two most universally beloved characters on the show, Maddie and Chimney. And second of all, it's like the perfect harrowing... It's like, it's the perfect meet cute to... like harrowing sort of like trauma moment, and they fight to like get back to each other, and they've been through so much together, and they seal it with a kiss, and they're gonna heal together and grow. Oh my God, I love them so much. They have their first kiss in the hospital. Not to flash forward to later in the show, but it reminds me of, there's a line in season 7 when, you know, spoilers, they're in the hospital again for an unrelated reason. And Maddie says something like, have you noticed that all of our big life moments happen in a hospital? And then she says, in the funniest
Jennifer Love Hewitt, Valley Girl delivery. She says, "It's becoming a thing."
It's becoming a thing. Wait.
So let's just say this is kind of the beginning of all of their most important moments happening in the hospital. Say it with me, guys. It's becoming a thing.
It's becoming a thing.
I think, you know, like that's my ultimate takeaway from this episode is Maddie, colon, it's becoming a thing.
Maybe that's the title. Maddie, it's becoming a thing.
It's becoming a thing. Yeah. People won't get what the title means until we're at literally like the last couple minutes of the episode.
Yeah, so guys, comment if you got to the last couple minutes of the episode. Everyone comment, it's becoming a thing.
Except what if we end up, what was the other thing we were going to call it? I wrote it down somewhere.
I don't remember. I already forgot.
The Spark of Juck.
Oh.
I'm sorry. The other one is so much better.
So much better.
We can't use that shit.
Let's leave Josh out of this, okay?
Let's leave Josh out of it. No offense, Josh. We love you.
Yeah, you'll get your SBF back. Don't you worry about that, girl. Like, I get it. But Maddie.
Juck. It's becoming a thing.
Oh, maybe that's the title. It's the two worlds colliding there.
Juck, it's becoming a thing. Yay.
Oh, I like it. Oh,
great
my God.
episode.
Great episode. I stand beside this best episode of the show so far. I loved this episode. It is at times both harrowing and joyous and heartrending, and it's everything that I want in a character episode of a show like this. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's true that, you know, Chimney Begins was awesome, and also this episode doesn't feature Tommy Kinard racism party.
Right. I saw a tweet today that was like some Buck Tommy defender was like, y'all didn't hate Tommy because he's racist. Y'all hated him because he wasn't Eddie. And someone very eloquently quote tweeted and said, raise your hand if you hated Tommy because he was racist.
And it's so crazy because, like, we didn't, as we said in the Chimney Begins episode, like, we didn't, like, realize how racist he was until we rewatched Chimney Begins. And also, why is it, like, a moral problem just to dislike a character for getting in the way of your ship, you know? Like, we used to be a proper country. Like, you guys have... Skin has gotten too thin on this fandom, because why are you mad at people just for, like, not liking a character because he's not their ship?
Yeah. So long as this isn't
normal.
Like, you know, supernatural fandom going after the actresses of Joe and Ruby because they're getting in the way of your gay incest fan fiction.
True.
And
like,
making their lives
limits.
hell. Like, when it crosses the
limits, and it is true that people do bully Lou Ferrigno Jr., but I feel like it's vastly made up for by all the weird cult of fans he has.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, the actresses playing those women on Supernatural did not have that.
Yeah.
So
it's also, you know, like,
they couldn't even make a bunch of money on Cameo.
The tone of, oh my God, period. The tone of the harassment also, it needs to be said, we're bringing some nuance into this conversation. The tone of the harassment is very, very different when it is a group of a predominantly female audience, like, saying, hey, we don't really like this guy, versus a very sort of mixed demographic fandom attacking ostensibly random women for the crime of being on a show.
I mean, to be fair, I think a lot of the Supernatural viewers were also women, but still, it's like, yeah, those actresses very much were affected by misogyny, versus I don't think it's possible for Lou Ferrigno Jr. to be a victim of misogyny, but that's just me.
Listen, challenge accepted.
I hate that we have hijacked this to start talking about Tommy again, because why is his name in our mouths again? I want to be free of this guy forever.
We're about to find out.
Oh God, I'm about to watch the episode.
I have to.
Let's just wash our mouths out for a second and say that, you know, this was truly a formative Maddie episode, and it was, I don't want to tie it all back to Maddie's relationship, right? It was a formative Maddie episode, period.
100%.
This is her truly getting to the point where she's actually free of this horrible relationship, and obviously she's gonna need to to heal from this extremely traumatic event. And like, even if it was a terrible person that she stabbed to death, she still did stab a person to death. And I don't think you can just like recover from that overnight.
Yeah, you can't just walk that off.
I think we're gonna see.
That's true.
I think we're gonna see the ripple effect of that. But ultimately, I'm just glad that she was able to, she never has to worry about Doug again.
Yeah. One note in praise of the kiss at the end of this episode. Although I don't think it needs to be defended because everyone loves it. I would like to take some time to praise Kristen, to praise the show, to sort of just praise the episode itself, because like I feel like in another show with another relationship, if they had an episode that was all about a woman being kidnapped and violently abused by her horrible, monstrous husband, and it ended with a kiss solidifying a new relationship, I would definitely think that was icky. But because of how well it was done on this show, because of how well the relationship between her and Chimney was built as not only this connection between these two people, but as a source of healing and as a source of new life. I really thought it was done super, super well. It's like a rare instance of sealing a moment or like a prolonged moment of intimate horror with like actual genuine intimacy that was done tastefully. And so I just thought it was so good.
I agree. You kind of get the vibe that they are like trauma bonding here, that it's not just like this fairy tale like now the monster has been slain so we can live happily ever after. And also I think we are going to see in the ensuing episodes that like, oh, everything's not just like all fine and dandy after that. Like their relationship is going to have some ups and downs because like they can't just kind of start right back up where they were because they've experienced this. So, I think it doesn't exist in isolation.
Yeah, definitely. I am very looking forward to seeing Maddie developments, Maddie developments, Chimney developments, because at least for now, those two are free of the horrors. And we get to see Maddie really, really thrive, unshackled and sort of liberated from the past. And I feel like that's what we've all been sort of clamoring for. Maddie is like genuinely like one of my like top 3 characters on this show. I love her.
No, she's great.
So much. And so I'm so excited to see where she goes going forward.
Yeah. Happy Doug Death Day, everybody.
Happy Doug Death Day.